I was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, surprisingly. I asked my parents shortly after I was born if we could move to Dallas, and they agreed. And we got here in 1952. I'm a graduate of Lakewood Elementary School, Woodrow Wilson High School, and the University of Texas at Austin. When I graduated from UT, Barbara and I got a duplex apartment in Northern Hills, just 3 or 4 blocks south on Glenwood, 3 or 4 blocks south of Armstrong, so just south of the Park Cities. And spent a lot of time walking and roaming in the Park Cities and made a lot of friends there. I knew I was going to be an architect from 8th grade. I took some classes way back in junior high that uh, suggested that that was where my passion lay, and that's what I wanted to do. And got my architecture degree at UT and hustled back to Dallas. I wanted to work in Dallas. It's where I wanted to build a practice and raise a family, and it just seemed right. When I got back to Dallas after school, I was impressed with how Dallas was a place that was creating its context. It's a new city. It's an open city, a vibrant city, and architecturally, anything goes. Contemporary architecture is appreciated here, and I noticed that from the minute I arrived. Duncan Fulton and I founded GFF. At the time, it was called Good, Haas, and Fulton Architects. We did that in May of 1982. And our vision was always to create a firm that had a strong emphasis on design and a reputation for fine design, and a place that people would love to come to work and build a career and stay with us a long time. We wanted to do projects that shaped the city, that made it a better place. One of the reasons why I was attracted to architecture was that it improves people's lives in so many ways. If you meet a client's need, meet an organization's need, a corporation's need, it helps them succeed and be happier in what they're doing. And then from an outward standpoint, it creates a more beautiful city. It creates a memorable place. I think when we travel from city to city, whether it's abroad or whether it's here in the U.S., the architecture that we're struck by reminds us of that visit, that time, that travel, just like music does. You know how people will say a song transports them back to their college days or their high school days. And architecture creates memories of the things we did and where we went. And the more memorable and outstanding the architecture is, the longer those memories last. Here's what I'll say about the most significant architects and architecture of the Park Cities. I want to start with architects. And I'm gonna name 5 architects that I think have had the biggest impact on the built environment of the Park Cities. And I'm going to first talk about houses. And I'll go in chronological order. Hal Thompson, Henry B. Thompson, everybody called him Hal Thompson, was an architect who was practicing from around 1916, 1917 until roughly 1935 or 40. And he did some of the most fabulous houses in the Park Cities, a number of them on my top 10 or top 40, and we can get into that at some point. You can't talk about Park Cities architects without talking about Fouché and Cheek. And Fouché and Cheek came just a few years later than Hal Thompson. That's Marion Fouché and James Cheek. And their area of specialization is the Spanish Mediterranean style of work. And we all think about Highland Park Village as the most memorable of all of their work. But they did houses starting in the 20s that were just spectacular and had a big impact on our city. And I would tell you that I think in many ways that Spanish Mediterranean style is the most appropriate for our climate and our location and our history among those styles. Third, Anton Korn. Anton Korn is famous for his Tudor houses, and he did mansions and very palatial houses, but also Tudor became the favorite style in the Park Cities. Small cottages, little builder houses that maybe even weren't architect designed, were adapted from some of Korn's really wonderful work and carried on through the 20s and 30s. We see them on the streets all over the Park Cities. I want to mention two architects that have practiced a little more recently. I think everybody knows who Charles Stevens Dilbeck is. Dilbeck did quirky architecture, but it was captivating. People loved it. You could characterize it as ranch style. He didn't like that terminology. He did lots of derivative things. French Norman was a favorite style of his. You may know the Four Corners, the corner of Douglas and Shenandoah, where all four houses, still standing fortunately, were done by Dilbeck in 35 and 36. And he was active from that time, from the early 30s until about 1950, he was producing those houses. In fact, whole blocks, Bryn Mawr, 4,000 block of Bryn Mawr was nothing but Dilbeck houses. We've lost most of those. Finally, I want to mention Bud Oglesby. Bud Oglesby is a more contemporary practitioner, and everything I say in this discussion is focused on architectural history. So I'm not talking about contemporary work now, I'm talking about history. The Oglesby group was active from the mid-50s, still practicing today. Bud Oglesby is long dead, but they have done some of the most beautiful houses. Bud worked with Alvar Aalto over in Finland, and he brought that modernism but warm back to Texas. And for instance, 4606 St. John's is a house that I put on my list of top 10 fabulous, soft Texas contemporary regional house that's perfect for our climate. And Bud did a number of other fine houses. So those are the 5 architects that I think have had the most influence and done the work that's most lasting and most beautiful. Now, you also ask about civic work, community buildings other than houses. And I already mentioned Highland Park Town Hall. I didn't mention Highland Park Town Hall. That's a Lang and Witchell project. Both the Highland Park Town Hall and University Park City Hall are among our most important buildings, and appropriately so. University Park City Hall was designed by Grayson Gill in the mid-30s. Highland Park Village, Mark Lemon's churches for Highland Park Presbyterian and Highland Park United Methodist, and Dallas Hall at SMU. I would probably list those projects as our most important non-residential buildings in the Park Cities. I really enjoy rattling off some of my favorite houses and addresses of homes and work that's most important. And again, I think what I'll do is talk in chronological order correctly. And the earliest style of home in the Park Cities were the prairie and craftsman style houses that were built right when Highland Park was founded 1908, 1910. Those, interestingly, we don't have the names of those architects, and quite possibly there weren't architects involved. The builders handled those houses without. And we still have several of them that are just spectacular. 3903 Miramar is a favorite, 3409 Harvard, and 3508 Lexington. Those prairie-style houses are beautifully restored and maintained. Another style I want to mention, and there's not many of them, is shingle style. Shingle style was most popular in New England. That's an East Coast style. And Fouché and Cheek, once again, did on Drexel a couple of really fabulous shingle style houses that have been preserved. Spanish Mediterranean style architecture, which has, as I would say, is so appropriate for a hot climate and our history here in Texas. The most important house, I believe, that was done in that style is 4321 Overhill. That's Hugh Prather's second house, and Hugh Prather was the developer of Highland Park. So that house has immense importance. It's important architecturally, and it's important because of who commissioned the design and lived there. And that was J. Allen Boyle was the architect for that house, and it was done in 1923, I believe. I've talked about Tudor. I won't go into that in too much detail, but again, Fouché and Cheek did 4305 Lorraine, Dr. John and Lori Harper's house. Beautiful house, beautiful inside and out, and wonderfully preserved. And then also 4201 Lakeside is an Anton Korn house. And that section of Lakeside Drive, I'll call it the Connor Park Lakeside Drive District, is special because it's an entire block face of houses that have been preserved. There's not a new one among the bunch, and that's very special, and we should treasure that. We began losing many of the homes in the Park Cities in the boom of 1980 to 1985. And this was primarily in University Park, where the houses were smaller, the housing stock was more affordable, and they were smaller. They were of less architectural significance, and entire blocks gradually houses were demolished and new homes built, often by builders, often for spec. And then that resumed. We had a downtime in the economy from 85 to 90. In 1990, it picked up again. And so over the course of about 15 years, roughly half of the homes in University Park were turned over. And let me just say, reinvestment in a community is extremely important, extremely valuable. But the downside of it is we lose a lot of houses. Now, let's fast forward to 2008, 2009, 2010. The same thing has begun to happen in Highland Park. Great amount of growth in wealth. And people who could afford to had a great desire to live on Armstrong Parkway or Lakeside Drive or Beverly, and they wanted what they wanted. And I can list some things. They want higher ceilings. They want a great room with the kitchen and dining and family space in a huge single room. A downstairs master bedroom where the closets are larger than the bedroom. And the town of Highland Park, everybody needs to know this, the town of Highland Park gives you increased lot coverage if you'll put your parking below grade. The lot coverage goes from 45 to 50%, I believe. I believe I have that right. And so therefore, people are building basement media rooms, wine cellars, and putting their parking down there so they can build a larger house. So you add all that up, and what happens is that the land value has come to trump the value of the improvements, and people think nothing of paying a lot for a beautiful lot and just scraping the house to build back exactly what they want. The reason why people build below grade is because they get to cover more of the lot. It's a zoning ordinance thing in Highland Park that's frankly come back to bite us, because it's an incentive for people to demolish and rebuild. And I want to give a statistic here. I just worked through this because of what we're doing for Preservation Park Cities. Willis Winters and Prudence McIntosh and Virginia McAllister published a book in 2008, Great American Suburbs, the Park Cities. Of the houses photographed in that book, 45 of them have been torn down since 2008. And what Willis told me was, Larry, if you want to see what I thought the most important historic houses were in the Park Cities, look at the ones that we photographed in the book, because that'll tell you we thought they were most important. So we've lost 45 of them in the past 13 years. What's changed in recent years, the land values are trumping the improvement values. So in the past, people would look for particularly smallish or affordable homes to be the ones to demolish and build back. I mean, all of this is because of the desirability of this community. HPISD, people want their children in HPISD, great schools. They want the convenience of being close in, a central part of our city. So the essence is it's a beautiful place to live. And people, as wealth has increased, they can afford now to be tearing down larger houses on larger lots in more prestigious locations, and we're losing some of the most important historic homes. There's two things we can talk about through your questions. One is, how does the community feel about losing these historic homes? The second is, how do they feel about what's replacing those historic homes? Whenever word is on the street that a demolition is pending of a house that's deemed to be significant, there is an outcry, but it's a small outcry. Unfortunately, the culture in the Park Cities is not a culture that universally has us valuing our history. So when there's a demolition or a pending demolition, there is concern, there's talk that goes around among those who care deeply, but it doesn't carry strongly into the community. It's not a majority, and that's what we're trying to change and trying to improve. The houses that are replacing our architecturally significant older homes vary greatly. We get some replacement homes which are admirable, and I want to cite a few examples if I can. At 3756 Armstrong, we lost a house that O'Neill Ford had designed in the 50s. It was the Pinson House, and it was much treasured. We hated to lose it. What is being built back is a very fine contemporary home, which is beautifully sited to take advantage of its prominence up on the little hilltop. Windows look out over Hackberry Creek and Turtle Creek. Birnbaum Magadini, Bruce Birnbaum and Trissy Magadini are the architects. They've done a fabulous job. I told Bruce just the other day, thank you for making sure that what we got back in return is something of almost equal value. Now, I want to contrast that with something, and this is potentially unfair, but Al Hill Jr.'s house at Gillen and Lakeside was one that we treasured greatly, beautiful house. And the home under construction there now, in its scale and in its form, it is clear to me as an architect, and I can sort of see what's transpiring, even though it's still under construction. What we're getting back is not sensitive to its location there on Turtle Creek, Exall Lake. It's a shame. So, summary: what the replacement houses, if it's architecture of distinction, then all is good, and style doesn't enter into it. I want to give another specific example. The southwest corner of Miramar and Drexel. House was torn down. What's being built, and it's almost finished, is a house I would characterize as Martha's Vineyard in its style. It's beautiful, blue-gray Pennsylvania bluestone with its second floor nestled within the roof line, so its scale is right. It's not overpowering. Beautiful details, the little balconies and the bay windows, and so it's a gorgeous house. So irregardless of style, the scale and the detailing and the quality of materials is wonderful. Likewise, the southwest corner of Miramar and Eaton, the Oglesby Group just finished a new home built on that site, 2-story, flat roof, elegantly scaled, smallish in scale, but with materials that just take your breath away. Sheet copper, exposed steel, a wood window system, which is elegant as can be. These long, thin Italian bricks. They're red bricks, and guess what? They're not being painted white. I do not want to see another transitional white box with black windows that's anywhere USA, and they're going over and over and over and over and over again. And there's the problem. We need an architecture of distinction replacing our historic homes when that happens. What I would like to do, I would love to sit down with every new homeowner, new property owner who comes into the Park Cities to give them a little more background on the history of the Park Cities and discuss. Now, I'm pretending I'm their architect now, okay? And I would like to discuss with them what's special about their lot, its views, the neighbor, the size and orientation of the neighbor's houses. How do we design something back on that lot which is sympathetic to location and orientation and history? So that's what needs to happen. It's not that the architects coming into the Park Cities are causing a problem. It's owners who they don't have a mind of their own. They see a white box with black windows and a pitched roof with minimal detailing, and that's, give me one of those. And that's not the right way to handle it. In order for a house to stand the test of time and really be lasting, it's really not a matter of style. My example of the 2 new houses on Miramar prove that up because they're very different in their style. What they have in common is a sensitive scale and use of elegant materials and beautiful detailing. That's what's going to stand the test of time. You know, when we lose a house, when a house is demolished, what I've been troubled by is that we also lose many mature trees that were planted at the same time the house was built. So we're talking about the landscape of the Park Cities, the streetscape of the Park Cities that dates back 70 years or more. And how troubling is it to drive by and the front end loader, the bulldozers push the house over. The trees have been cut off about 4 or 5 feet above grade, and then they're just pushed over. And often they're not removed because they're truly in the way of the future house. And often nobody knows what's going to be built back anyway. They do that prior to hiring the architect to do the plan. So we're losing the landscape of the park cities along with these houses. And this is something that's concerning. We got to remember we're losing both, and they're treasured assets. When we lose those front yard trees and backyard trees, a number of things happen. One is the neighborhood loses its history. The trees create shade, which makes our neighborhoods cooler, and we lose that because you just can't plant back trees of 36-inch caliper in the huge canopies of shade. And the atmosphere of the neighborhood, somebody driving the streets, it feels more like a suburban, newly developed suburban neighborhood than it does a neighborhood with the history of Highland Park and University Park. Preservation Park Cities has as its mission to protect the history and the culture of the park cities and the built environment, and to educate the public about the meaningful nature of that history. So it's a group of folks, growing all the time, fortunately, who are passionate about that and would like to spread the word and help build a culture of appreciating our history, loving our history. I was at a Christmas party, 2019, when I bumped into Bobby Clark. Bobby is a former city council member in University Park and an architect and contractor and a good friend. And I said, "What are you doing, Bobby?" And he said, "Well, I'm trying to save the Elbert Williams house." And he went on to tell me that, and I knew this, the Elbert Williams house was on the market there on McFarland, and at a high price, $13.5 million. And everyone's pretty sure that somebody's going to buy it and tear it down. And by golly, he wants to save it. He said, "I think we need a book. Somebody needs to write a book about the house." And I said, "Bobby, I'll write that book. I love the house and I enjoy writing, so I'll do that." So we took that on as a project, and it was important to Preservation Park City. So they said, "Larry, we'd like for you to be a board member. Would you come be a board member?" And so I said yes. So I got involved with the organization that way. Preservation Park Cities is such an important organization because of how important the history of these communities are. You look at the quality of development, the quality of the planning, the initial planning, the quality of what was developed here, the quality of life that was built, and that is rare. It is spectacular, and it deserves the attention of preserving its history. So it makes that organization incredibly important. In the summer of 2020, the board of Preservation Park Cities hatched the idea that what we really need is a list of the most significant architecturally significant historic homes in the park cities. And the reason why they thought that was important was twofold. One was that if we don't focus, if we don't figure out which are the houses really worthy of preservation, we're going to lose them. We're going to be floating around and not focused down. In fact, Joel Williams, the former mayor of Highland Park, who sits on the board, said, "Larry, I think 100's too many. I think we need a top 25 or a top 10." And so the significant and endangered homes, we keep thinking of what the name of this program is going to be. was set out to become a tiered list. And what I've been working on is identifying the top 10, the houses we absolutely can't lose, can't afford to lose them. A top 40, because 10 doesn't cut it, we need more than that. And then the rest of them for a top 100. And I want to say what the criteria is. Why does something get on the list? This is important. So here are the things that I think are the criteria. It should be among the best work of the best architects who practiced in the Park Cities. It should be a premier example of a particular architectural style, among the best of our houses of that style. It could be the home of an important historical figure, a leader in the community, or somebody whose impact went well beyond the Park Cities. It could be a first of, a house which is the first one of something. So these are the criteria that I've been using to work out what these homes are. And I just want to cite a couple of examples, okay? One is SMU Bishop Muzan's house, which was constructed in 1916 there on University Boulevard. It's a beautiful house. It's a wonderful example of a neoclassical style, but it also was the home of a significant historical figure, and it was, in a sense, one of the first of, because it's now the oldest home still standing in University Park. Another one I'll mention, stylistically completely different and much later, Eugene and Margaret McDermott's house. That's 4701 Drexel, and that house was done by Scott Lyons in 1960-ish, 62, something like that. And Stephen Butt is currently, his family is currently beautifully restoring that house. But it's both great architecturally, and it was the founder of TI and his wonderful philanthropic wife's house with an incredible art collection. So that house is important on several levels. Hence, those houses get on the top 10 list. And so what do we do with this list? Until we have a list like this, we can't effectively go to the town of Highland Park or the city University Park and begin to talk about some minor protections, some things we can do that they can do governmentally to help us save these houses. And that's where a demolition delay ordinance or a simultaneous replacement house building permit along with a demolition permit to avoid speculative demolition. These are just little tools, but we're not going to get there unless we say, if a house is on this list, then these two ordinances could come into play. I don't think we'll ever get a full historic protection ordinance, but we can get some little things done once we have this list. There are two other programs of Preservation Park Cities that I think are extremely valuable. One is our landmarking program, and what that does is a committee of Preservation Park Cities gathers and works on this each year to identify 5, 6, or 7 homes which are worthy of preservation, and if the owner agrees, they're plaqued. They have a bronze plaque that goes on there. This educates the public. You're walking down the street and you see the plaque and it suggests to you this must be important. Very good. The home tour, in a sense, grows out of that. Every home that's not on our annual home tour is not necessarily, doesn't have the landmark plaque. But what better way to educate the public about what's important in preservation and restoration than to let them inside, not just outside, but inside these homes. Often they get to meet the owners, and it's just a fabulous program. 4, 5 homes a year on that tour, and it's been very popular, and I think it has tremendous value toward building the culture of appreciating our history. The architecture of the Park Cities is unique because of the overall high quality through a long period of time. If we look at the best buildings, houses and otherwise, of the Park Cities dating back to 1910, 1912, and take it up to present day. First, let's take it up to the definition of history, which is 50 years prior, so 1970. So that period of time did fabulous architecture, and we continue to see beautiful things done here. So it's among the most beautiful suburbs. I'll call it a suburb, even though it's an island city. One of the most beautiful suburbs in America, one of the most sought after places to live. Very special. The biggest mistake we made in all those North Dallas suburbs is doing rear entry houses with alleys and no front porches, and people don't know their neighbors at all. They just don't, they come and go for years, and I've never met the guy. There's a fine spirit of philanthropy in the Park Cities. People are generous. They're generous of their time, and they're generous with their wealth. And that's another wonderful aspect to this community. Churches are such an important part of community, and we're in a time when we're sort of less churched than we used to be, but that's not necessarily true in the Park Cities, where between HP Methodist and HP Presbyterian and University Park Methodist and Park Cities Baptist and Preston Road Church of Christ, we've got large active churches that are community. They have a community outreach, which is valuable, and we're blessed to have that here. All of the buildings in a community need attention to architecture for the community to thrive and be the best it can be. And I want to give an example, just a small example, but Highland Park Presbyterian is our church, and we recently went through a pretty significant rework, addition, internal replanning, and almost every bit of that was about how it welcomes the community in and how we gather and talk to each other and interact and have fellowship. Every one of those changes at our church had that focus about it. And that's just an example of how the work of an architect and the wisdom of a client can come together to cause any building, especially a community building, a building of faith, to have a larger impact and improve the quality of life in a community and the sense of community. One of the greatest issues we have with preservation in the Park Cities is that we don't have a legal ordinance in either city that creates a protection. So it's going to rely on a cultural change where people are more outspoken about the importance of this. We need to celebrate those who choose to preserve, restore, renovate these fine houses, and we need to find a way to have an influence on those who don't. And so it's just going to take more people getting involved with our organization, with Preservation Park Cities, and it's going to take sharing our feelings with neighbors and others. And we've even talked about doing some yard signs, which encourage and celebrate. The house of the month, the yard of the week, things which bring people's attention to yes, that's beautiful. I never noticed that before. Wow, they did a great job. Um, it's good. We we do home tours as a part of as a program, Preservation Park Cities. I think we need to do more of that and get people inside these houses and just educate more, teach them more. Not in response to your question, but just conversation here among us is this concept of carrot and stick. Preservation Park Cities wants to do both. We want to both create these carrots, these celebrations that honor and get people smiling about something they've just accomplished. And then we also want the stick side where we do some shaming. We'll shame some people. You are never going to be a welcome neighbor around here because of what you've done. We need to do that carefully, but still the carrot and the stick. From the very founding of First Highland Park and then University Park, there's been a desire for excellence and to create two cities, two communities, which were special and of the utmost echelon, attracting people who were smart and who were thoughtful and had a sense of community and a caring for others. And it spilled over into architectural excellence and planning excellence and little things like the parks and how the parks in both communities, whether it be Highland Park's green belts or University Parks, parks like Curtis Park and Caruth Park, were places that we all love to gather and we took such great care of. And it's all just a spirit of excellence in everything that was planned and created and done here. And so it goes back to when I rattled off some of the architects who were most influential. These were really fine architects that we were blessed to have doing these initial homes in the Park Cities way back in the teens and 20s and 30s. I've always enjoyed the difference between the word home and the word house. Uh, Home has something almost spiritual about it. It's a frame of mind. It's a sense which goes beyond just the shelter. It has to do with the broader thought about what home means. It's neighbors and friends and schools and your churches, and you put all that together and it creates a place you call home. So to preserve this quality of home, we have to address things beyond just the physical architecture. We've got to preserve streetscape. We've got to preserve the neighborliness. And I want to just mention this to keys into that. It's very popular right now in certain places to do what are called front porch houses, where instead of people coming and going in their alleys and they never see their neighbors, they tend to congregate on the front porch and they wave at their neighbors and they say hello. And that is part of what creates home and we can do to preserve home is design new houses and preserve the old houses that have those community outreaching aspects to the architecture. It's why prairie style houses, you think about it, maybe the least likely houses to be preserved in the Park Cities would be those 1910 to 1920 prairie style houses, but people love the porches. And right now there's pumpkins all up against the front steps, and people have their blow-ups in the yard, and they decorate the porches with their swags and their Christmas lights. And that helps create a sense of home. And I should have mentioned that earlier. Christmas decorations. This place is mad for Halloween and Christmas. It's great. It's part of what makes Park Cities wonderful.